Hello, everyone, and happy Sunday again. I wanted to share a couple stories with you today about God's provision. So, I was a single mom for quite a few years, and my kids were really small. On one occasion, these are two different stories, but my kids were pretty small on one of these occasions. And I have three children, and I needed three dressers. None of them had a dresser. And I just asked the Lord to please provide dressers for my children, because at the time, being a single mom, I didn't have the extra money to go out and buy dressers. And when I ask the Lord for something, I never, ever tell anybody my needs except the Lord. I just go to Him, I ask Him in private, and He's the only one that knows about it. And so I'd ask the Lord to please provide a dresser for each of my children. And I was at work one day, and out of the blue, this girl walked up to me and she said, Laura, she said, I have three dressers that I don't want anymore. They're really in good condition, but I don't know who to give them to. I just thought of you, and I thought, if you needed them, you are more than welcome to have them. And I thought, oh my gosh. I said, well, yes, I do. I could use those for my children. So the Lord provided three very nice dressers, and they were identical dressers for my children. Very nice. So then the second story is, my kids are older at this point, and now they're able to stay home by themselves. But they were old enough to be just a little rambunctious, and the VCR that we did have, VCRs in those days, it went out, and my kids needed a little bit of entertainment while I was at work. And they were old enough to stay home by themselves, especially my oldest son. And so I just asked the Lord for another VCR. And again, I didn't have the money at that time in my life to go buy a new VCR. So I asked the Lord for a VCR. I said, Lord, would you please provide for my children to have a VCR? Because we had so many VHS tapes for them to sit and watch and just be entertained. And I was I think we lived an hour from my family in another town in California. And one evening, my dad's little sister and her husband knocked on my door. They never, ever, ever came to see us. We would see them, but it was only when we went down there to see them. And they knocked on my door, and when I opened the door that evening, I was so shocked that it was them standing at my door. And she was holding something in a box, and she said, we have a surprise for you. Again, now I hadn't told anyone, even my kids. I hadn't even told my kids about that. I just asked the Lord in private. And so, of course, they came in, and she said, you know what? She said, you were on our heart so strong to give you this VCR. I thought, God, you are so awesome. I just love the way God works. He never fails, does he? If you give him an opportunity, he never fails. I mean, he doesn't fail ever, but give him something to work with. And she said, we got a new one. And this one is just like new. But we wanted to give it to you because you really came on our hearts for this VCR. And so I told her that I had asked the Lord to provide a VCR for the kids. And I thought, and I've said through the years, because you end up, after so many years of walking with the Lord, you end up with a track record with God, just like Abraham did. Abraham, when God promised him, he looked back at the faithfulness of God, and that was the track record that Abraham was looking at of all those things through all those years that God had done for him. And Abraham said, to the promise of God, I call you faithful, because he had been faithful in Abraham's life, and he will be faithful in yours too. God's no respecter of persons, the Bible says. He loves each of us just like he loves the next one. We're all his favorites. And so I have said now for years, I say, Lord, you've never failed me, but you have always amazed me. So give him something to work with. If you have a need that looks just impossible, or you think, oh gosh, God doesn't care about that. Yes, he does. He cares about the finest detail of your life. So just give it to him and give him something to work with, and watch how he performs it in your life. Be encouraged today.